A pair of small sneakers, black and white, sit by the door. The kind every kid in the neighborhood wanted. The kind that made you feel just a little taller, a little faster. They were the last thing anyone remembers about him. A child only 7 years old, stepping outside for something so ordinary and never returning. In one of the largest housing complexes in New York, where thousands of people cross paths every single day, he managed to vanish into the shadows, as if the ground itself swallowed him whole. No shouts, no witnesses, no warning. Just a sudden silence that still hangs heavy years later. What could erase a child from the middle of a crowded city? Did he slip away by choice, or was he taken in the blink of an eye? This is the story of a boy who walked out the door one night and into a mystery that has refused to let go. And it begins here, with that empty space where a child should have been.
Starrett City stretches across the Brooklyn waterfront like a small city within a city. Tower after tower rises from the ground, each filled with hundreds of apartments stacked on top of one another. At night, the buildings glow with scattered windows of light, while long stretches of concrete and darkened stairwells fall into silence. The sound of distant traffic mixes with the hum of elevators and the occasional slam of a metal door echoing through the halls. Inside, the corridors seem endless. Narrow hallways carry the faint buzz of fluorescent bulbs, the smell of cooking drifting from behind locked doors. Trash chutes line the walls, their metal mouths clanging shut at all hours. For strangers, it is easy to lose your way. For residents, it is a maze you know by memory, but never by comfort. This was not a quiet suburban neighborhood. It was a dense, restless place where thousands of lives brushed against each other every day, yet anonymity was the rule. People passed by one another without stopping, footsteps blending into the background of a world that never truly slept. In the cold weeks of January, the wind cut sharp between the buildings, pushing through courtyards and parking lots. Shadows stretched across the walkways, broken only by the flicker of streetlights that barely held back the darkness. It was the kind of place where a single child could step outside and be swallowed by the vastness around them, unnoticed, as if the city itself had hidden them away. And on one winter night, that is exactly what happened.
Patrick was only 7, but already the world had left its mark on him. Everyone called him Lil P, a nickname that carried both affection and the weight of a child trying to carve out space in a crowded world. He was small for his age, just under 4'8", with warm brown eyes that always seemed to be searching for something more. A faint scar cut across his left eyebrow, the kind of mark children earned from running too fast, climbing too high, or daring one more leap than they should. On his stomach, a birthmark set him apart, something only family would recognize in a flash. He had been diagnosed with ADHD, but without medication, his days often swung between bursts of energy and moments of frustration. He wasn't the quiet child who blended into the background. He was restless, easily distracted, always moving. Yet beneath that surface, there was a tenderness, an ache that showed itself in ways too big for a boy his age. More than anything, he longed for his biological mother, a pull he couldn't shake no matter how many toys or distractions surrounded him. Family would later say his emotions sometimes spilled over, that he felt deeply, maybe more deeply than he knew how to handle. Patrick's world was stitched together by the little things that made him feel safe. A worn toy he carried around, a child-sized jacket that swallowed him in the winter wind, the red t-shirt he loved, and his prized Michael Jordan sneakers. Shoes far too bright and bold to go unnoticed, yet perfectly fitting for a boy who never wanted to be invisible. He wasn't just another face in the crowd at Starrett City. He was a child still finding his footing, still learning how to belong. And then, just like that, he was gone, leaving behind only those small belongings to remind the world he had been there at all. But the belongings raised a haunting question. If these were left behind, where was Patrick?
Patrick's life had already been shaken before that night. He and his sister were taken from their mother after claims of neglect, placed in the care of strangers under a system meant to protect, but often leaving children caught in limbo. For a boy who longed for stability, the sudden fracture of family was a wound too deep for words. The foster home he was placed in only widened the distance. His foster mother did not speak English, and Patrick, just 7 years old, could not bridge that silence. The smallest needs, the simplest questions were swallowed by the gap between them. For a child already restless, already carrying so much inside, it was like being trapped in a house where no one could hear you. Those around him would later say he acted out, that he grew defiant, that he ran when he couldn't find another way to be understood. But behind those actions was something raw. A boy trying to make sense of why he couldn't be with his mother, why the people who loved him most had been taken away, why every place he landed felt temporary. His confusion wasn't just in the way he moved or misbehaved. It was in the ache of not belonging anywhere. A child who wanted to be seen, to be heard, to be held by someone who understood him, instead found himself navigating walls built by language, by circumstance, by decisions made far above his head. And while the system noted his behavior, what it could not measure was his heartbreak. It could not capture the quiet moments when Patrick must have asked himself why he was here and not at home. That longing, that confusion, would shape every choice he made in the days ahead.
January 22nd, 2010. It was just after 9 o'clock on a Friday night when Patrick was asked to do something simple, something so ordinary it should have meant nothing. Take out the trash. He slipped into his blue jacket, the one that seemed almost too big on his small frame. Underneath, he wore a red t-shirt and blue jeans. On his feet, his prized black and white Michael Jordan sneakers, the shoes he never wanted to take off. These were the clothes that marked his last known steps. Patrick carried the bag out of the apartment and into the hallway. For a moment, everything was exactly as it always was. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the muffled sounds from televisions behind closed doors, the echo of his sneakers on the floor. He was a 7-year-old boy on a quick chore, no different than countless other nights. But when the chute slammed shut and the bag was gone, so was he. Minutes passed, then more. The apartment stayed quiet. The door never opened again. What began as a routine task became the instant his life vanished into silence. It was 9 p.m. on the dot when Patrick was last seen alive. From that minute forward, time itself seemed to stop, leaving only questions where a child should have been. And in that stillness, the nightmare began. The first minutes after Patrick failed to return were filled with confusion, then fear. His foster mother reported him missing, and police arrived to canvass the complex. Officers knocked on doors, checked stairwells, and called out his name into the long concrete corridors. Neighbors remembered little, if anything at all. Some claimed they hadn't seen him that night. Others thought they might have, but nothing lined up with certainty. The search spread across the grounds, yet no child appeared. What began as a missing persons call quickly tangled into conflicting accounts. Different versions of events surfaced, clouding the timeline before it could even be pinned down. Each small inconsistency chipped away at clarity, leaving only a haze of unanswered questions. Then, only days later, a new layer of tension erupted in a courtroom. A judge ordered Patrick to be brought to family court. When his biological mother could not produce him, she was briefly jailed for contempt. That moment was the first public fracture in an already fragile story. A child still gone, a family now divided under the weight of suspicion and heartbreak. It was here that the case shifted from panic into something darker, something that would refuse to let go.
Jennifer Rodriguez stood at the center of a storm she could not control. She had already lost custody of her children, and whispers from relatives claimed she once threatened to take Patrick back. That single rumor clung to her like a shadow, feeding suspicion at every turn. When pressed about his disappearance, she denied knowing where he was. Investigators put her through a polygraph. The test and the results that followed were enough for her release, but the doubt never lifted. To the public, she was either a grieving mother trapped by circumstance or the keeper of a terrible secret. Jennifer insisted she believed Patrick had run away, that somewhere out there her son was still alive, hiding. It was a desperate hope, one she repeated even as the world looked at her with hard, unforgiving eyes. Her story and the way she clung to it became the most divisive piece of the case, splitting opinion between those who saw guilt and those who saw heartbreak. And as her words echoed through courtrooms and headlines, the case began pulling further into darkness.
The search for Patrick didn't just stretch across states, it tore straight through his own family. Relatives were scattered between New York, Maryland, and Florida, and investigators moved from door to door, trying to piece together a trail. But instead of unity, they found accusations. Brothers pointed at sisters, cousins at uncles, each one convinced another relative knew more than they were saying. The weight of suspicion poisoned everything. Family dinners turned into interrogations, phone calls ended in shouting, and bonds that once meant safety now carried mistrust. For those still searching, every whispered rumor felt like another door closing, another betrayal to add to the list. The cost wasn't only in time or energy, it was in trust. What should have been Patrick's strongest net of support had unraveled into suspicion and anger. Love and loyalty twisted into doubt. And in that chaos, the focus on Patrick himself began to blur, as if the very people who should have been pulling together were tearing the case apart. But while family fractures deepened, the investigation was quietly moving into an entirely new direction. By 2010, the case had shifted from the streets to the courtroom. Patrick's disappearance was no longer just a mystery. It became the foundation of a federal lawsuit. His relatives accused the city's child welfare agency of negligence, claiming he was placed in a home that was never fit to care for him. The lawsuit pointed to painful details. Patrick's foster mother barely spoke English, while Patrick barely spoke Spanish. Communication between them was broken from the start, and according to the complaint, his confusion and distress were ignored. The very system meant to protect him may have left him more isolated than ever. In 2011, a judge dismissed parts of the case but allowed the family to continue against the individual caseworkers who oversaw his placement. 2 years later, the lawsuit was amended to include a claim of wrongful death, a haunting acknowledgement of how little hope remained. By 2018, the city agreed to a $6 million settlement. The terms were unusual. The money was intended to support the ongoing search, or, if Patrick was ever found alive, to benefit him directly. Court records, motions, and filings from this battle remain sealed away in legal archives.
yet they hold the potential to reveal what officials knew, when they knew it, and whether opportunities to protect Patrick were missed. And as the legal fight reached its end, the unanswered questions surrounding Patrick's fate only grew louder.
The years after Patrick vanished stretched on like a wound that never healed. Each birthday passed with no celebration, only a candle lit in his memory and the ache of not knowing. Anniversaries of his disappearance became painful reminders, marked by public appeals, flyers, and vigils that faded as quickly as they appeared. Time moved forward, but the case remained frozen. Investigators released age-progressed images, trying to show the boy as he might look if he were still alive. By 2024, the picture was haunting. A young man of 22, his features sharpened, his childhood long gone. For his family, it was a cruel glimpse of a future they never got to witness. Watching a child grow only in photographs is a grief few can imagine, a constant reminder of years stolen. Then, in 2025, came another blow. Patrick's father passed away, taking with him the hope that he might one day see his son walk through the door again. His death added another layer of silence to a family already scarred by loss. Yet Patrick's mother, despite everything, still clings to belief. Decades may have slipped by, but her hope refuses to wither. And while hope keeps the family waiting, the case itself has begun to take on a life of its own in the shadows of the true crime world.
When a child disappears, the mind scrambles for answers. Over the years, several theories have surfaced about what really happened to Patrick, each carrying its own weight, its own contradictions. One theory suggests he may have run away to rejoin his mother. Relatives claimed she had threatened to take him back, and her bond with him, despite the custody loss, never truly faded. It seems plausible a boy longing for his mother might try to find her, but there's a hard counterpoint. She insisted she hadn't seen him, passed a polygraph, and no evidence has ever linked her to his disappearance. Another possibility is that Patrick was hidden within the wider family network. Relatives stretched across New York, Maryland, even Florida, and suspicion turned inward quickly. Some accused others of keeping him in secret, whispers of betrayal tearing through the family tree. But after countless investigations in multiple states, no trace of him was ever uncovered. Rumors carried weight, but the evidence never followed. A darker suspicion lingered around the foster placement itself. The home where Patrick lived was fraught with challenges, a language barrier, concerns that his distress was overlooked, questions about whether he was ever truly safe there. If something happened under that roof, it could explain the silence that followed. Yet authorities never uncovered proof of foul play in the household, leaving only shadows and speculation. Finally, there's the theory of a stranger abduction, the possibility that Patrick simply slipped away and crossed paths with someone dangerous. But for that to hold, there should have been sightings, clues, or reports from the neighborhood. Instead, the record is painfully empty. No confirmed witness ever placed him beyond that front door. Each theory carries its strongest piece of evidence, and each is undone by its own silence. And it is in that silence that the case has remained, waiting for a break that never seems to come.
What keeps this file from closing is not what's been found, but what has never been found at all. A single clear sighting from someone who cannot be written off as unreliable, a neighbor, a delivery driver, a building superintendent, would change the shape of the whole story. If one person could place the boy stepping into a particular car or walking toward a specific door, that small human memory would knot together 1,000 loose ends. Then there are the images that might still be sleeping on old hard drives, grainy frames from a shop camera, a traffic cam, a courier dash cam, or a landlord's building recorder.
Even a single blurred clip that shows direction, a license plate fragment, or the back of a jacket can give detectives the thread they need to follow. Technology can stretch a single pixel into a lead. Phone data from that night could also tell a movement story, but witnesses did not. Where phones pinged towers, which numbers called whom and when. Those invisible footprints can put people in the same place at the same time or prove they were elsewhere. Modern analysis of old records can reveal patterns that were invisible a decade ago. Physical evidence deserves a second look with today's tools. Re-examining any clothing fibers, fingerprints, or trace DNA with current methods could yield matches that were impossible before. A partial profile, when run against new databases or through investigative genealogy, could finally point toward a family line or a person of interest. And sometimes the key is human, someone who carried guilt, shame, or fear for years and is finally ready to tell the truth. A cousin who remembered an overheard comment, a friend who moved away and kept a secret, an ex who never spoke up. Those late tips have cracked cases before. If the public checks old photo albums, replays forgotten voicemail messages, or asks elderly relatives one more time, a tiny detail might surface that rewrites everything. If any one of these missing pieces appears, the case would leap forward. These are the openings investigators still watch for as they keep looking.
A boy once filled these hallways with laughter, and then, without warning, his presence was gone. What should have been the beginning of a life became a story cut short, tangled in shadows and silence. For his mother, the fight never ended. Each year carried the same weight of questions that no system, no courtroom, no investigation has managed to answer. The tragedy isn't only in his disappearance, but in the void it left behind, in the home that no longer echoed with his footsteps, in the memories that remained suspended, in the justice that never came. It is a reminder of how fragile trust can be when the very systems meant to protect a child leave so much undone. And yet, even in the silence, there is a chance, because every case, no matter how cold, can still hold one truth waiting to surface. It only takes a single memory, a single detail, a single voice willing to step forward. So I leave you with this question. If you held even one piece of information, no matter how small, would you share it? Because that one lead could be the difference between silence and an answer. If you know something, please contact the official hotline listed below. And if this story has moved you, share it. Someone, somewhere, might remember a detail that has been buried for decades. Subscribe for updates because this fight is not over, and this story deserves an ending. The screen fades, but the question remains. What if the key to this mystery is still out there, waiting for you to speak?